They said humanity was too dangerous to be trusted, that we were reckless, impulsive, and incapable of restraint. When the Galactic Council convened for the final hearing, all the great powers of the galaxy stood in judgment over us. Thousands of alien species gathered in a chamber larger than anything Earth had ever built. Their verdict was swift, cold, and absolute: exile. Humanity was to be banished from the known galaxy, cut off from trade, communication, and the network of stars that connected every civilized world. The sentence was supposed to end us, but it didn't. It only made us stronger. At first, the Council expected us to collapse. Without their technology, their support, their permission, we were supposed to fade into the void, another species that reached too far and fell apart. But they underestimated something essential. They didn't understand what happens when you corner humanity, when you tell us we can't, when you strip away everything but survival and pride. They had forgotten what we were made of. The day the blockade went up, the skies over Earth were full of burning ships. Our colonies returning home, fleets dismantling, communications going silent one by one. The stars that had once been routes of exploration and trade became a prison wall. The Galactic Council broadcast a message across every frequency: humanity is hereby exiled beyond the Orion boundary. Any contact with them will be considered an act of treason. For a while, despair settled in. The world governments, already fractured, struggled to find unity. Billions were left wondering what future we had left. But amid the anger and confusion, a quiet determination began to grow. Engineers started working day and night in underground hangars. Scientists who had been forced to abandon alien technology began reverse engineering what little we had stolen or learned. And ordinary people, miners, pilots, soldiers, dreamers, came together under a single unspoken goal: to survive, no matter what it took. Within a decade, the first generation of post-exile ships launched from the dark side of the moon. They weren't sleek or elegant like the Council's vessels. They were rough, loud, and full of human ingenuity. They ran on hybrid engines built from salvaged alien cores and human fusion reactors. They looked impossible, yet they worked. Humanity had always been like that, making the impossible work, one stubborn step at a time. The Council watched from afar. They expected us to turn on each other, to tear ourselves apart as resources grew scarce. But we didn't. Something about being exiled changed us. We stopped looking to the Council for approval and started looking to the stars with hunger. Out there beyond the Orion boundary were uncharted systems, worlds no one had claimed, ruins no one had explored, and resources waiting for those bold enough to take them. So we went. At first, it was just small groups, scouts and explorers, families who refused to stay on a dying Earth. Then came the fleets. Each ship carried a piece of humanity's stubborn heart spreading out into the black. They found worlds with thin atmospheres and made them breathable. They built cities inside asteroids and called them home. And everywhere they went, they left something behind: stories, songs, warnings, and hope. Meanwhile, the Council's influence began to weaken. They didn't notice it at first, too busy with their own rivalries. But the edges of their empire started to crumble. Trade slowed, rebellions flared up, and whispers began spreading through the stars. Rumors about humans who had returned, stronger, faster, smarter than before. By the time they realized what was happening, humanity had already transformed. We were no longer the same species they had cast out. We had evolved, not through biology, but through necessity. Every failure, every loss, every desperate struggle had forged us into something harder. We learned to blend technology with instinct, logic with emotion. Our ships could think, but they also had a heartbeat. Our soldiers could fight in silence, but they still laughed in the face of fear. The first contact after exile happened a century later. A Council patrol ship stumbled upon a human mining outpost in the Perseus Rift, a region thought to be lifeless. What they found wasn't a desperate colony clinging to survival, but a thriving hub full of trade, music, and light. The humans there didn't run or hide. They hailed the patrol, invited them in, and served them food made from alien grains we'd learned to cultivate better than the Council ever had. When the patrol returned, the Council dismissed their reports as exaggerations, but soon more sightings followed. Human-built warships moving through council space, not as invaders, but as traders, mercenaries, explorers. Humanity was everywhere, and yet nowhere the council could control. Then came the event that changed everything. A massive supernova erupted near the council's core territories, destabilizing entire systems. Billions of lives were at risk. The council's fleets couldn't respond fast enough. Their bureaucracy froze, their alliances fractured. But when the chaos reached its peak, ships arrived. Thousands of them, bearing an insignia no one had seen in generations, the rising star of humanity. We didn't ask for permission. We didn't demand forgiveness. We simply acted. We stabilized their stations, evacuated their colonies, repaired their failing power grids. Humanity saved the very civilizations that had cast us out. And when it was over, when the fires died and the stars calmed, the council convened again. This time, they invited us back, but we didn't return as the exiled children of Earth. We came back as something greater, as equals, as leaders, as the species that refused to stay down. Some called it the Second Dawn, others simply called it justice. Even then, though, not everyone in the galaxy was pleased. Some saw humanity's rise as a threat. They whispered that we had grown too powerful, too fast, that we hadn't forgiven the council, that we were only waiting for the right moment to strike. And maybe they were right, because deep within the outer colonies, something was stirring. Massive fleets were being built in silence, beyond the council's sensors. A shadow network of human worlds was aligning under a single banner, and somewhere, in the void between stars, a message was being prepared, one that would echo through the galaxy and shake the foundations of the old order once more. We had been exiled once. We had been humbled, broken, forgotten. But now humanity was rising, not as servants of the council, but as masters of our own destiny. And when the stars themselves trembled beneath the engines of our fleets, the galaxy would finally understand what the council had failed to see from the very beginning. You can exile humanity, but you can never extinguish us, because when we rise higher than ever before. The transmission ends there, static, filling the silence. But somewhere, beyond the reach of the council's fading influence, a voice whispers through the dark, "The time has come." The exiles have returned, and that's where the story truly begins. The voice that whispered through the dark wasn't just a rumor, it was a signal. At first, no one could trace where it came from. The message was faint, fragmented, bouncing through deep space relays that shouldn't have existed. But the pattern was unmistakably human, carrying an encryption style used only by the old Terran fleets. It was simple, defiant, and filled with purpose. We are not done. For the scattered human colonies living in the shadow of the Council's power, that message was more than a call. It was a reminder. Even after a century of rebuilding, the wounds of exile still lingered. Children grew up learning about the day humanity was cast out, told through stories whispered in ship corridors and mining tunnels. It wasn't ancient history. It was the story of who they were. Every generation swore they'd never be humiliated again. And now, the whisper across the stars had reignited that promise. The Council, meanwhile, was uneasy. Their diplomats pretended calm, but beneath the surface there was fear. Reports had begun surfacing from distant sectors. Unregistered human fleets appearing out of nowhere, equipped with technology that rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, the Council's best. Whole systems that had once been silent were now lit up with human transmissions. Worlds that had been thought uninhabitable suddenly showed life signatures, industry, and energy spikes. The Council convened again, in the same towering chamber where humanity's exile had once been declared. The great alien species filled their seats, scaled, feathered, luminous, insectoid, all murmuring in unease. The high speaker of the Council struck the sound bell, and the chamber fell into silence. "We believed the human problem had been solved," the speaker said, their voice echoing across the hall. "It appears we were mistaken." What followed was a wave of argument and panic. Some demanded immediate action, a preemptive strike, to ensure humanity's expansion didn't threaten the balance again. Others urged diplomacy, warning that humans had already proven capable of defying extinction. But underneath it all, there was a truth none of them wanted to admit aloud. They were afraid. Far from the Council's debates, humanity's hidden worlds were preparing. Deep in the Perseus frontier, in a system surrounded by drifting nebulae, a planet named Eos served as the heart of the movement. From orbit, it looked calm, a quiet, green-blue world with scattered lights. But beneath its clouds were massive shipyards, command centers, and academies where a new generation of humans trained for the inevitable. In one of those academies stood a young officer, looking out over the construction yards. The sight below was breathtaking. Ships rising from their cradles, engines glowing like new suns. These weren't just warships. They were symbols. Each hull bore the mark of the Phoenix, the emblem of rebirth that humanity had chosen after exile. Every beam and plate was a statement that the Council had failed to break them. The officer had grown up on a mining colony near the edge of the Orion expanse. He'd never seen Earth, but he carried its memory like a myth. His parents used to tell him stories about blue oceans and skies that stretched forever. To him, Earth wasn't just a planet. It was proof that humans came from something beautiful, something worth fighting for. When the signal came through the comms a year ago, he volunteered without hesitation. But not everyone shared his certainty. Across the colonies, humanity was divided. Some believed they should return peacefully to rebuild trust and coexist with the Council. Others were convinced that peace had died the day the blockade went up. Those divisions ran deep, threatening to fracture the unity that had made their rise possible. In the underground command chambers of Eos, the leaders of the colonies gathered. They were old now, veterans of the exile, survivors of the frontier wars, pioneers who had seen entire worlds rise from dust. They spoke quietly, but every word carried weight. "The Council knows," one of them said. "They've seen our fleets. They're preparing." "Let them prepare," another answered. "We've been preparing for 100 years. "But if we strike first," a third voice warned, "we become the monsters they said we were." That silence hung in the air like gravity. Everyone knew what was at stake. Humanity had clawed its way out of isolation, but one wrong move could throw everything back into chaos. Still, the whispers continued. The same ones that had traveled across the stars, carried by that old Terran code. The message was growing, spreading like fire through every colony. We are not done. Meanwhile, far beyond Eos, deep in the forgotten zones of space, a fleet moved unseen. Its ships were darker than the void, built with stealth plating that absorbed light and sensors. The fleet's commander, known only as the Navigator, watched from his bridge as distant stars drifted by. He had been one of the original exiles, alive long enough to remember the humiliation of the Council's sentence. He had sworn that one day the galaxy would remember what they had done. But his mission wasn't vengeance. Not yet. His fleet was searching for something ancient. Long before the Council's rise, there had been another power in the galaxy, a civilization that vanished without explanation. Legends spoke of their technology, their vast structures buried in dead systems. If humanity could find even a fragment of it, they could change the balance of power forever. In the ruins of a shattered moon, the Navigator's fleet found their first clue, an enormous ring, half buried in dust and silence. It pulsed faintly when the humans approached, as if recognizing them. The Navigator ordered his crew to begin scanning, but deep down he already knew this was no ordinary relic. Whatever it was alive. Back in the core worlds, the Council began to lose control. Reports of unrest spread through their colonies. Trade routes once secured by Council patrols were now under human protection. Refugees fled to human space, seeking the freedom they could no longer find under Council rule. And still, the Council refused to admit the truth, that the galaxy had changed and the center of power was shifting. On Eos, the officer stood in the observation bay, staring at the stars. He knew something was coming. The training simulations, the sudden mobilizations, the coded transmissions, it all pointed to something bigger than any of them were being told. He didn't fear it, though. He felt ready. Humanity had waited long enough. As the night stretched on, he thought of the stories he'd heard growing up, how the Council once called humans reckless, unpredictable, and dangerous. Maybe they were right, he thought. But that recklessness was also what made them unstoppable. Then the alarm lights flashed red across the hangar. A signal came through the command network, Priority 1, Classified Origin. Every screen lit up with a single phrase, pulsing in white letters. The exiles are coming home. The officer felt his heart pound. Around him, the workers and pilots froze. The words carried a power that no order or speech could match. It wasn't just an announcement, it was destiny unfolding. Far away, in the cold depths near the Council's border, the Navigator's fleet came out of hyperspace. Before them stretched the outer defense ring of Council space, massive fortresses built to keep humanity out. The Navigator looked at them through the viewport and whispered to no one in particular, "You kept us out once. Let's see if you can do it again." His fleet didn't open fire. Not yet. They moved in silence, scanning, watching, waiting. Across the human colonies, messages went dark, comms went silent, fleets vanished from tracking systems. Something enormous was being set in motion, but no one outside the inner circle knew what. In the Council's core worlds, fear began to spread again, quietly, in the halls of power and among the common people. No one knew when the humans would strike, or if they already had. But everyone could feel it. The air had changed. The stars seemed brighter. The silence before a storm, and somewhere, buried in the static between the stars, that same old signal played once more. A heartbeat across the galaxy. "We are not done!" The words carried through space like a promise and a warning, reaching even the farthest systems. Those who heard it could sense something stirring. Something ancient and unstoppable rising from the ashes of exile. The humans were coming home. But no one, neither friend nor enemy, truly understood what that meant. Not yet. The stars over Eos seemed quieter that night, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Across the planet's cities and orbiting shipyards, people whispered about the message. The exiles are coming home. No one knew who had sent it or what it truly meant, but everyone felt its weight. It spread faster than any official broadcast, slipping through networks into bars, dormitories, and command stations. Wherever it was heard, the same feeling took hold. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything again. In the council chamber on Eos, the leaders of the colonies met in secrecy. The room was dim, the air tense with the hum of distant engines. On the central screen, a holographic map displayed the outer rim of council space, marked with shifting red lines, frontier patrol routes, defense grids, and now, new signals that hadn't been there before. The Navigator's fleet had appeared again, closer this time. One of the leaders, a woman with gray hair and a voice like steel, leaned forward. "They're probing the border," she said. "No aggression yet, but they're moving in patterns that suggest preparation." "Preparation for what?" another asked. "Defense or invasion?" "No one knows," came the quiet reply. "But the message, the timing, this can't be coincidence." Outside, life went on as if nothing had changed. Miners returned from shifts beneath the planet's crust. Engineers tested ship drives. Children played under the artificial suns of orbital stations. But underneath the rhythm of daily life, everyone felt the tension. Humanity had come too far to turn back now, yet the shadow of the Council still loomed large over every decision. Far across the galaxy, in the shining capital of the Council known as Virelian Prime, the ruling assembly was also restless. Their greatest fleets had gone silent on the rim, their patrols reporting strange readings. The Council's intelligence division had intercepted fragments of human transmissions, though most were scrambled beyond recognition. Still, one phrase appeared again and again. "We are not done." The High Speaker summoned an emergency session. "They are preparing for war," the speaker said, eyes flashing beneath the chamber's light. "And if we wait, they will strike first." But not all agreed. Among the council's delegates was a younger voice, one of the few who had studied human history rather than fear it. If we move first, they said, we prove their stories true. The humans see us as tyrants, and every aggressive act will strengthen that image. We must understand their motives before we make another mistake. The room erupted in argument. The same arrogance that had once condemned humanity now fractured the council itself. For all their advanced intellect and unity, they could not agree on how to handle the species they had once dismissed as primitive. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Perseus frontier, the navigator's fleet continued its search. Inside his flagship, a long obsidian vessel known as the Horizon's End, the crew worked around the clock. The relic they had uncovered on the shattered moon still pulsed faintly, like a heart trying to wake. The navigator watched it through the observation window, silent and thoughtful. "Sir," one of his officers said, breaking the quiet, "the energy readings are growing. It's responding to us." "Not to us," the navigator murmured. "To something within us." The relic emitted a low hum, almost like a voice, though no words could be understood. Its resonance seemed to synchronize with the ship's systems, as if trying to connect. The engineers were wary. It could be a trap, an ancient weapon, or something beyond understanding. But the navigator wasn't afraid. He believed it was a key, left behind by the lost civilization that came before the council. If humanity could unlock it, they would no longer just challenge the council. They would surpass them entirely. On Eos, the young officer who had seen the message first was assigned to a new command post. His unit had been chosen for a mission so classified that even he wasn't told the full details. All he knew was that they were being sent beyond the edge of mapped space, near where the navigator's fleet had vanished. The rumors said they were to make contact or perhaps to retrieve something. No one was sure which was true. Before departure, he visited the surface one last time, walking through the streets of a city that had once been a colony outpost. Lights glimmered from towers built out of old ship parts, and the air buzzed with the hum of fusion generators. People waved as he passed. Some nodded in quiet pride. Everyone knew what it meant to wear the Phoenix emblem. It wasn't about rank or power. It meant carrying the memory of exile, the promise of return. As the officer looked up at the sky, he could see the faint lines of human ships moving in orbit. They looked like silver sparks drifting across the black. "We're coming home," he whispered. One way or another, but not everyone in human space shared the same vision. On a nearby world, hidden in the dense mists of a gas giant's moon, a faction known as the Conquered had formed. They believed the human expansion had gone too far, that if war broke out again, it would destroy everything they had built. Their leader, a quiet strategist who had once served in the Council's diplomatic corps, was working behind the scenes to prevent open conflict. The Concord sent messages in secret, reaching out to sympathetic figures within the Council, hoping to broker peace. But peace was no longer easy to find. The rumors of new fleets, of old weapons awakening, and of human dominance spreading faster than ever, all of it fed into the growing paranoia. Some believed the navigator's fleet had already discovered something powerful enough to challenge the entire galaxy. Weeks passed, and the officer's ship, the Soul's Edge, entered the void beyond the frontier. The journey was long, the stars distant and unfamiliar. The crew kept their spirits high with stories of home, of Earth, of a future where humans would stand among the stars, not as exiles, but as leaders. But as they neared their destination, strange readings began to appear on their sensors, anomalies, energy spikes, ghost signals in the dark, and then, without warning, they found it. The same ring structure the navigator's fleet had discovered months before, only now it was active. Streams of light circled its surface, forming symbols no one could read. The officer stared through the viewport, speechless. "Is it alive?" someone whispered. Before anyone could answer, the ship's systems flickered. The comms filled with static, and then a voice. Not mechanical, not human. Something older. "Welcome, children of exile." The crew froze. The voice came from everywhere at once, through the ship's walls, the comms, even inside their minds. "You carry the fire that once consumed the stars," it said. And now you seek to light them again." The message cut off, and silence returned. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. The officer swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly on the console. "Send a report to EOS," he ordered. "Tell them, we're not alone out here." But by the time the message left the ship, the ring flared again. Space around it twisted, and the stars blurred like ripples in water. Then, just as suddenly, the distortion vanished, and the Sol's Edge was gone. On EOS, the transmission never arrived. The last recorded signal was nothing but static, and the faint echo of a single phrase: "We are not done." The Council intercepted fragments of the same signal and mistook it for a declaration of war. Fleets began mobilizing. Warnings spread across the stars, and somewhere deep within the ancient ring, something stirred, something waiting for humanity to prove what it had become. The navigator's fleet, still searching nearby, picked up traces of the event. His officers begged him to turn back, but he refused. He knew what this meant. The relic wasn't just awakening, it was responding to humanity's presence, calling to them across the void. Whatever it was, it had chosen them. And now, both humanity and the Council were racing toward it, each believing the other would strike first. Neither realized that the true threat wasn't between them, but in what waited beyond the ring. The galaxy was shifting, the silence between stars breaking. Humanity's exile had ended, but something far greater and far more dangerous was only beginning. The galaxy was no longer quiet. Everywhere, the hum of preparation filled the void. Fleets moving into position, coded transmissions flowing between worlds, and whispers of something ancient awakening beyond the edge of known space. The balance that had held for a century was gone. Humanity's rise, once a distant rumor, had become an undeniable truth. But now that truth stood on the edge of turning into something far greater, or far darker. On EOS, the air in the command chambers felt thick with tension. Every screen, every radar, every satellite feed showed movement. Council armadas forming at their borders, human fleets gathering just beyond their range. Both sides waited, each accusing the other of aggression. The messages that passed between them were full of restraint and warning, but everyone knew words could no longer hold back what was coming. The disappearance of the Sol's Edge had shaken the colonies. The officers and crew were heroes, symbols of the new age, and their loss had ignited anger across human space. Some demanded retribution. Others claimed the Council had destroyed them. The truth, that they had vanished near the ancient ring, remained hidden, known only to a handful of leaders and the Navigator himself. The Navigator had not spoken to anyone for days. Aboard the Horizon's End, he stood alone in his command deck, staring at the glowing relic suspended before his ship. It pulsed with a deep rhythmic light now, almost like breathing. Every time it brightened, the ship's sensors registered a faint signal, coordinates shifting through impossible distances. The Navigator didn't fully understand it, but he felt it drawing them somewhere deeper, beyond even the Council's reach. His second officer approached quietly. "Sir, the colonies are demanding action. EOS wants confirmation. Are we preparing to engage?" The Navigator didn't answer right away. He simply watched the relic's glow and finally said, "We're preparing for something, but not the war they think." He knew there was more at play than politics or revenge. The ring's voice, that strange ancient echo, had spoken to them like it knew their history, like it had been waiting for humanity specifically. It called them children of exile. That wasn't chance. It meant something. Back in Council space, chaos spread through the highest ranks. The High Speaker had declared a state of galactic emergency. Across the stars, propaganda blared through every network. Human expansion threatens peace. The Council stands for unity. But even within their own worlds, fear was replacing loyalty. Some citizens didn't believe the propaganda anymore. They'd seen human ships save colonies, deliver aid, and offer refuge when the Council had turned them away. The old story, that humans were reckless and cruel, was beginning to crumble. Among the Council's fleets, tension simmered. Captains argued over whether to hold position or strike first. No one wanted to ignite a war, but no one trusted the humans not to. And then came the rumors. whispers of the ring, of the lost human ship, and of a power that could reshape the galaxy. One of the Council admirals, an old strategist who had been part of humanity's exile vote long ago, looked over the star maps with tired eyes. He remembered the arrogance of that decision, the belief that exiling one species would keep the galaxy safe. Now, seeing the growing storm, he wondered if they had only delayed the inevitable. "You can't cage fire," he murmured to his officers. "You can only make it burn brighter." In the deep sectors, the horizon's end finally reached the coordinates emitted by the relic. What they found was breathtaking and terrifying all at once, a vast, silent structure floating in the void. It wasn't a planet or a station. It was a network of rings within rings, orbiting a dark core that seemed to swallow light. The scale of it was beyond comprehension, stretching for thousands of kilometers. When the navigator saw it, he felt both awe and dread. "This isn't just a weapon," he whispered. "It's something older, something that built the path the Council walks." Sensors detected residual energy signatures, patterns similar to the technology that powered nearly every ship and world in the galaxy. It was as if the Council's science, their entire civilization, had come from fragments of this forgotten structure. Humanity had found the origin of the stars. The moment their ships entered orbit, the structure began to awaken. Lights flickered across the rings, slow at first, then faster, until they burned like a new constellation. The relic aboard the horizon's end resonated with it, humming louder until the sound filled every deck. Crew members clutched their ears, voices shouting through comms. "Energy surge! Power levels spiking!" And then, silence. A message appeared on every console, written in a language that no one had ever seen but somehow understood. The Maker's return. The cycle completes. The navigator stared at the words, unable to look away. "We've opened something we don't understand," he said quietly. Back on Eos, the first reports began to arrive, intercepted fragments from the navigator's fleet. The leaders tried to make sense of them, but before they could, the Council fleets began to move. The war everyone feared was about to begin. In orbit above Eos, human warships activated their defense grids. Pilots climbed into their cockpits. Civilians took shelter. The young officer, who had once gazed up at the stars, now stood on the command deck of a new flagship, the Dawnfire. His eyes were fixed on the tactical display. Council fleets converging from multiple systems, their engines lighting the void. "They're coming," his second said. He nodded slowly. "Then let them see who we've become." The order came through seconds later. "Hold positions. Do not fire unless fired upon." The officer repeated it, though he could feel the tension in every crew member around him. They all knew how quickly a single mistake could ignite everything, but even as they waited for the Council's first move, strange signals began disrupting both sides' communications. The interference came from the same direction as the ancient structure. Neither human nor Council technology could block it. The closer their fleets came to confrontation, the stronger it grew. At first, both sides blamed each other. But then something impossible happened. A burst of energy erupted across several systems simultaneously, blinding, silent, and vast. Every ship, human and alien alike, was forced into emergency shutdowns. For a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to flicker. When the systems came back online, new symbols appeared on every display. Those same ancient markings. Across human ships, voices spoke through the static. Do not repeat their mistake. No one could explain it. The Council believed the humans had found some kind of ancient weapon. The humans, on the other hand, suspected the Council had unleashed something to stop them. Neither side realized the truth, that the ancient structure had awakened fully. Its purpose still unknown. As fleets regrouped, communications crackled with half-heard transmissions, reports of stars dimming, navigation systems warping, gravity wells forming where none existed. The galaxy itself seemed to be shifting. In the depths of that strange anomaly, the navigator watched as the structure's core began to open. Inside was something glowing, a shape like a sun, but burning cold blue. He didn't understand what it was, only that it pulsed in time with the relic on his ship. "It's calling to us again," one of his officers whispered. The navigator's voice was low. "No, it's calling to all of us. Across the galaxy?" Both human and council ships received the same signal. A low tone followed by a message. "The children of the Makers must choose." No one knew what it meant, but every leader, every pilot, every soldier felt it in their bones. Something greater than war was coming, something that would decide not only who ruled the galaxy, but whether it survived at all. The young officer on the Dawnfire stared into the star field, where the council armadas were still forming ranks. His hands trembled slightly as he whispered to himself, "We wanted to rise higher, but maybe we climbed too far." In that moment, far across the void, the ancient structure released another pulse of energy, powerful enough to be seen from a dozen worlds. The stars flickered and then went dark. Silence filled the galaxy once more, heavy and expectant. The war hadn't begun yet, but everyone could feel it. The climax was coming, and when it did, the fate of every living being in the galaxy would hang in the balance. The stars didn't stay dark for long. One by one, they came back to life, but not as they were before. Their light shimmered differently now, bending and warping like reflections on water. Across the galaxy, sensors went wild. Ships lost navigation, systems blinked out and then rebooted in strange patterns, and old star maps no longer matched the skies above. Something had changed at a fundamental level. The ancient structure's pulse had done more than disrupt. It had rewritten reality itself. On Eos, panic spread through the control centers. Engineers shouted over the noise of alarms, trying to stabilize communications. The main screen flickered, showing distorted readings, star systems moving where they shouldn't, space itself folding in ways that defied every known law. "The stars are shifting," one of the operators said, disbelief in his voice. "Space is changing shape." The young officer aboard the Dawnfire stared at the chaos on his display. "Get me the council frequencies," he ordered, but the comms returned only static. Then, through the interference, a faint voice broke through. Alien, familiar, terrified. "This is Admiral Rayan of the Council Fleet. Do not engage. Something's happening to the fabric of space. Repeat, do not engage!" The transmission cut off with a sharp burst of static. The officer looked at his crew. "That wasn't a trap," he said quietly. "They're seeing it too." Before anyone could respond, a blinding light flared outside the viewport. For a moment, it looked like a new star being born, but it wasn't. A massive shape emerged from the distortion, dwarfing every ship nearby. It was another ring, larger than the first, spinning with impossible speed. Lightning arced across its surface as it stabilized. Then, as if answering the first ring's pulse, a signal burst through every system in the fleet, human and council alike. The message was the same across all channels. The Makers are not gone. The cycle begins again. The navigator, aboard the horizon's end, heard the same words echoing through his ship. He stood motionless, eyes fixed on the growing distortion near the second ring. His crew scrambled to analyze it, but the readings made no sense. "Sir, the gravitational fields are overlapping," someone shouted. If they synchronized, the entire region could, but the navigator already knew. He'd seen fragments of ancient logs recovered from the first ring, records written in a language only half deciphered. They spoke of something called the Great Reset, a cleansing meant to erase civilizations that had grown too far, too fast. The council had called it a myth, a warning from a long-dead empire. But it wasn't a myth. It was real, and it was waking up. He turned to his officers. "Send a message to Eos. Tell them the truth. The rings aren't relics. They're part of a system built to restart everything." The message went out, but before confirmation arrived, the power surged again. A wave of light swept through the fleet, passing harmlessly through hulls but leaving behind a faint afterglow. Every human who touched the consoles felt a pulse, an almost electric connection, like something reaching into their thoughts. For a split second, they saw flashes, oceans of light, stars being born, worlds burned clean and remade, and then silence. On Eos, the leaders of the colonies gathered once more. their faces pale as the navigator's message played through the chamber, built to restart everything. A system that purges civilizations when they reach a critical threshold. Humanity and the Council were never meant to survive together. The rings judge progress and reset what grows unstable. The room went still. Someone whispered, "It's not war between us. It's survival against whatever built those things." A grim realization spread among them. The exile, the Council's arrogance, the endless cycles of rise and collapse, they weren't just political failures. They were symptoms of something larger, something that had always been controlling the galaxy's fate from the shadows of time. But even as the truth sank in, divisions deepened. Some argued that the humans should unite with the Council to stop the rings from activating. Others believed the opposite, that humanity alone had the strength to survive the coming purge. The word alliance had been spoken before, but trust was a fragile thing. The wounds of exile still burned deep. In the Council's capital, the High Speaker faced the same revelation. Their analysts confirmed the impossible. The rings were ancient machines, buried so deep in the universe's fabric that even their oldest records had forgotten them. But the Speaker's advisors were divided. Some demanded immediate contact with the humans to coordinate a response. Others insisted that humanity's meddling had triggered this catastrophe in the first place. Fear turned to desperation. Old rivalries flared. And in the middle of it all, an encrypted message reached the Speaker's private channel, sent from an unknown source. It contained only one sentence. "The humans are not your enemies. The Makers are returning." The Speaker hesitated before locking the message away. If the others saw it, panic would spread faster than control could contain it. Yet even as they silenced the truth, more reports came in, stars blinking out, planets vanishing from sensors, regions of space going dark without a trace. The purge had already begun. Back aboard the Horizon's End, the navigator made a decision. "We can't stop the rings from awakening," he said, "but maybe we can control where the purge begins." He ordered the fleet toward the second ring, engines roaring to life. The closer they came, the more unstable space grew. Gravity twisted, time stretched, and ghostly reflections of ships appeared beside them, echoes from other moments in time. At the same moment, the Dawnfire received a fragment of the navigator's transmission. The young officer studied the data, his pulse racing. "He's going for the core of the second ring," he said. "He's trying to control it." His second looked uncertain. "If he fails, he'll set off a chain reaction that wipes out everything." The officer nodded slowly. "And if he succeeds, he might save us all." He turned toward the viewport, where the second ring burned like a halo in the void. The decision formed in his mind even before he spoke. "Plot a course. We're going after him." The fleet obeyed. Engines flared, tearing through the distortions as the ships accelerated toward the navigator's position. The Council's forces, watching from a distance, misinterpreted the movement as an attack. They began mobilizing in response, breaking the fragile balance that had held the galaxy back from total war. Within hours, chaos erupted. Battles flared along the borders, not from hatred, but from fear. Every faction thought they were preventing the end, not realizing they were accelerating it. The galaxy's skies filled with fire once more. Amid the chaos, the navigator's fleet reached the core of the second ring. The structure glowed with terrifying beauty, its inner mechanisms spinning faster than light. He could see fragments of other realities within it, planets that didn't exist, people who might have been. And at the center of it all, a shape began to form. Not metal, not machine. Something alive. His sensors couldn't define it. It was as if space itself was bending to make room for whatever was coming through. He knew then that the phrase, "the Makers are returning," wasn't symbolic. It was literal. The navigator's voice trembled for the first time. "They're not just machines. They're gates." Every ship across the human and Council fleets received the same broadcast, the final transmission from the Horizon's End. "The rings are summoning them. The purge was never meant to destroy us. It was meant to prepare the galaxy for their arrival." Then the signal went dead. Back on Eos, the officer's ship burst out of hyperspace near the second ring, just as it began to split open. His crew gasped as a wave of light washed over them, distorting everything outside the viewport. And within that light, something vast moved, shadows of forms older than any species, larger than any ship. The officer gripped the console, heart pounding. "This isn't war anymore," he said softly. "This is something else." As the light spread and the stars twisted into spirals, humanity and the Council faced the truth together, even if they didn't yet realize it. The real battle wasn't between them. It was for the survival of everything that lived beneath those stars. And somewhere beyond the distortion, a voice, not human, not alien, but ancient, spoke once more across every frequency. Calm and final. The cycle begins anew. The words echoed through the void as the galaxy trembled, standing on the edge of something no one could yet understand. The end, or a new beginning, was coming. The light swallowed everything. For a few seconds, there was no sound, no color, no sense of direction, only the overwhelming pressure of existence folding in on itself. Then, like surfacing from deep water, the ships emerged into a calm that was almost unreal. The chaos had stopped. The second ring floated before them, fully open now, its vast inner surface glowing like a sun seen through mist. Every ship in orbit, human and Council alike, stood motionless, their crews speechless as they watched something step through the opening. It wasn't a fleet, or a weapon, or anything that made sense to the human eye. The thing that came through looked like space itself bending into form, a shimmering outline that shifted constantly as if reality was trying and failing to define it. When it spoke, there was no voice, no language. It simply was. The message appeared directly in the minds of everyone who saw it. You have reached the threshold. The cycle completes. A wave of emotion rippled through every mind. Fear, awe, confusion. The navigator's fleet hovered closest to the entity. His ship, the Horizon's End, sent a pulse to scan it, and the data returned as chaos, impossible readings, infinite density, time running in circles. The ship's systems struggled to process it before finally giving up. The navigator stepped forward to the viewport. "It's not a god," he said quietly. "It's the system, the caretaker. It's judging us." Across the galaxy, every active system, from human colonies to Council archives, received the same signal. The rings were awake, and the entity that commanded them was assessing the sum of every civilization's existence. It was silent. Yet in that silence there was weight, centuries of history, war, creation, loss. It felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, from somewhere deep in the network of the first ring, a surge of energy burst out. Screens on every ship flickered, displaying fragmented words and images, human faces, council cities, the ruins of ancient worlds, and finally a single repeating phrase. Deviation detected. Cycle interrupted. The navigator turned sharply toward his officers. "We broke it," he said. "We've done something no one else ever did. We've changed the pattern." The entity reacted. The glow intensified, and the rings began to spin faster. Whole stars trembled under the gravitational pull. In the confusion, human and Council ships finally spoke across the static for the first time since the war began. No more accusations, no more commands. Just raw, desperate cooperation. "This isn't just judgment," said the young officer aboard the Dawnfire. "It's rewriting everything. If we don't act now, there'll be nothing left." His second looked up at him. "How do you fight something that controls reality itself?" The officer stared at the second ring, thinking of all the lives that had led to this moment. The exile, the rise, the endless struggle to prove humanity's worth. "You don't fight it," he said. "You show it why you deserve to stay." He opened a direct channel to the navigator. Static filled the line, but a voice came through. "I'm reading you," the navigator said. "We can't destroy it," the officer replied. "But maybe we can reach it." The rings react to thought, not just energy. They were built to measure intention, not power. What if we give it something different to see?" There was a pause, then quiet agreement. "A unified signal," the navigator said. "From both fleets. One voice." It was a wild plan, and no one knew if it would work. But in that moment, As ships from both sides aligned in the shadow of the second ring, it felt like the only choice left. Humanity and the Council combined their communications arrays, forming a massive network that spanned systems. Every ship, fighter, carrier, cruiser, poured its signal into the same frequency. Yet even amid peace, they didn't forget the lessons of the past. The fleets remained, not as weapons of war, but as guardians of balance. The officer continued his command of Unity's Edge, now part of the Exploration Corps tasked with mapping regions that had been unreachable before. In the silence of deep space, he sometimes caught faint whispers on the comms, residual signals from the vanished rings, fragments of alien language carried across the stars. They didn't sound threatening anymore. They sounded curious. Years passed, and the galaxy healed. The children of the new alliance grew up never knowing exile or judgment. To them, the story of the rings was something told in classrooms, a legend of how the universe once tested them and how they rose higher together. The phrase, "We rise again," became a motto, etched on monuments and whispered at celebrations. Still, the officer often returned to that same observation platform. He'd watch the stars and wonder if, somewhere beyond sight, the navigator still traveled among them. Sometimes he thought he saw a faint flash of light that didn't belong to any star, and he'd imagine it was a signal, a reminder that even if the cycle had paused, vigilance mattered. One evening, as he prepared to depart on another long-range mission, a council scientist approached him. She held a small device, humming with low energy. "We found something," she said softly. "A fragment from the ring's debris. It's still active." He studied it carefully. The metal shimmered faintly, alive with patterns that shifted like water. It wasn't threatening. It felt calm. "What does it do?" he asked. "We're not sure," she admitted. "But when we connected it to our systems, it adapted. It began copying our star maps, our records. It's learning," he smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's watching over us in a different way." When he boarded Unity's Edge again, he took one last look at Eos below. He thought about how far they had come, from exile to unity, from survival to understanding. Humanity had once been cast out, but in rising, they'd shown the galaxy something no machine or system could calculate. The power of choice, of compassion, of will. The ship lifted off, engines burning soft blue against the void. As it broke through the upper atmosphere, the officer looked out at the stars and whispered quietly, "We made our place in the galaxy, and this time, no one can take it away." The stars stretched before him, vast and endless, their light steady and warm. Somewhere in that glow, maybe the ancient watchers still lingered, silent and curious. Maybe they had finally understood that perfection wasn't the goal. Growth was. As Unity's Edge vanished into the deep, the galaxy turned slowly, its countless worlds shimmering like distant promises. The cycle had not ended, but it had changed, and so had everything else. Humanity had risen from exile to guardianship, from defiance to harmony. They had taken their place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as keepers of a future built together. And in that vast, eternal quiet, a new truth settled across the universe like a whisper carried on starlight. Some cycles aren't meant to repeat. Some are meant to evolve.